Okay, great. Okay, so let's just start with just pulling the belly in. So first of all, just feel it. So the easiest way to sort of just focus the mind there is just with the hand. So the thumb in the navel, and then the fingers just sort of around it. So like the size of an orange inside your belly. And now let's just pulling it in. Yeah. So it's just a muscle that's contracting and releasing. Just really sort of let the spine really get involved. So the spine arches backwards, and then the spine really bows forwards. And it's really the arms don't really belong to the dantian, they belong to the heart. And so it should really be the feet doing what your arms are doing. So just feel, so here it's like your toes are trying to sort of clench like your hand is. And then everything's opening out. And we want to feel the dantian as being two halves. So left side and the right side. The same as the brain. And in the same way that we tend to privilege one side of the brain over the other, you find, especially when you meditate, that you're more in one side than the other. And so just feel the two sides. Okay, now let's just alternate them. So now just really you're trying to make them equal rather than the same. So they've got quite different characters, but we want to give them equal attention. So just a figure of eight, really. The same way that the brain is a figure of eight. Two globes barely connected, or two hemispheres. Let's just bring it back to just doing them both together, but they're not locked together. They're never quite in phase, because there's always a sense that you're sort of wriggling. You're a bit like a sort of child that can't sit still. Okay. And now let's just try basically the same exercise, but for the heart, yeah, but with a sort of a rowing action to start with. So just feel this center now. So it's in the sort of the hollow of the chest. So the thymus is here, just below the soft throat area. So that's quite superficial. That's like the thymus feels like it's wanting to burst out all the time. So that's like male pride. And whereas the heart is really deep. Yeah, so the heart feels like it's right back, almost on the spine. Okay. And now let's just row. So just reaching forwards and just really letting your shoulder blades separate at the back and your back bow. And then just pull the elbows back as far as you can, as though you're trying to meet them behind your back. And then again, forwards and back. Okay. And now basically the same thing as what we were doing for the belly, but more in the chest. So we want to get the musculature involved. So the muscles that move the shoulder blades and move the chest. So in a sense, there's less of them than there are for the belly. So we just want to make sure that these points have a real physical presence rather than just being a conceptual thing that's in our head or our mind. So the body mind, the physical mind. So we just want to make it difficult. If you make it difficult, then you'll feel it. So let's just try just a little bit. So what we'd like is just to get something here for the third eye. Yeah. So the two phases would be like sort of really furrowing the brow, really sort of tightening here, like you're really concentrating on something. So feeling the tightness here, but feeling it spreading from here, and then really sort of widening the eyes, lifting the eyebrows, and this sense that your eyes are getting wider apart. And then here, pulling the eyebrows down, furrowing the brow, pulling the eyes together, and then again opening. So the feeling is that we're moving the center right back, almost to the back of the skull here, and then we're protruding it forwards into the front, into the almost out of the forehead, and then back in. Yeah, so it's the same for all of the centers, really. We're just trying to get them to move laterally forwards and back. So they're tended to come forwards, and we'd like for them to just be able to settle back into their cave. And just only occasionally venture out. The more civilized we've become, the more these centers have drifted forwards. Yeah, I could never understand why. Yeah, John, he often had a furrowed brow. He often was in this phase, and to me it just spelt tension. But of course, he was just always drawing back into that back brain, or into what he called the guardian, into basically the right brain, you know, the big mind, the mind that sees the bigger picture. So the left brain is very much with the details and with that sequential aspect of time. You know, what one bit following the other, chronological time. Whereas the other brain, the big one, yeah, time it's more like it's time sort of fluid. You know, you can often get premonitions of things that are going to happen, or suddenly things from the past will flare into the mind. And so there's two very different conceptions of time, and John was really interested in it, because for any martial artist, what they would like most of all is this sense of before, this feeling that they're before the person they're fighting. They feel it before it's become manifest. They feel the other person's attack, their aggression, before it's actually become an actuality. Okay, now just figure of eighting. Now this is just, you just got to feel it. Almost like your head is sort of a bit sort of malleable, and it's sort of, ooh, it's going all gooey. Okay. And now, oh, crap. Okay, so now let's just get the stick. So just feel the two sides, the left and the right. And they start to tussle. So one is pulling, the other one doesn't really want to go, but it's being dragged along. And then the other one says, oh, that's enough. And it pulls back. Yeah. So this action is very much the two sides barely cooperating. It's not a central authority. It's not an ego that's telling my body what to do. That's what we're trying to get away from. What the philosophers are saying now is that, you know, the reason we have a right brain and a left brain is because that's the way reality is structured. It's like form and content. Yeah. So form would be the right brain, the big picture, and then the content, everything that fills it, is the left brain. Like in mathematics, you're doing calculus, sort of differentiation and integration. So it's easy to differentiate because you just have to, there's just a set of rules that you just have to apply. Whereas integrating, bringing it all together is more subtle. You know, there has to be an element of intuition. You have to have a feeling for it. Yeah, so what science tends to assume is that it all starts from matter. It all starts from the little things, and then they build up and eventually produce this form. Yeah. Whereas the opposite is just as true. There's a form there, like Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance. Yeah. The form is there, which just miraculously fills with matter. So everything is sort of, the organization is already there before the contents. Yeah. Okay. And now basically the same thing, but just moving on a different plane. The same idea. The muscles on either side are locked together and alternating. So one side is contracting, which stretches the other side, and that side eventually protests and starts pulling back. It's like a boxing match. These two people come into the ring that hate each other's guts, that just want to kill each other. They then spend an hour beating the shit out of each other. And then they fall into each other's arms and hug and cry. So always a tight belly. And then just a few more twisting. Just imagine you've got your hand on the belly again, so the thumb in the navel, fingers underneath. So that's there all the time. It's clenching. Okay, and now let's just try a few pulling and pushing. So just pulling the stick apart like this. And letting that slowly fill you with hope and optimism. So you feel yourself sort of just filling up inside with energy. So it's like an in-breath, but you're breathing in energy rather than air. So the air breathing can just do its own thing, or you can coordinate it. And then just pressing together, and this is almost like a deflation. And then just pulling again. So you just sort of, you're filling with energy and spirit. So everything starts to sparkle. And then when you push, it's like that's just disappearing and you're just seeing things unadorned. So it's like shifting your mood. This is almost like a mood of just, quiet depression, really. And then this is like you're just cheering up. So some energy is coming into you, which you can invest the world with to make it a more appealing place. And then pushing again. Yeah, so this is the belly sort of tightening, just drawing in. This is the yielding phase. And then when you pull, this is the lower back, just tightening, just very gently. Thymus is lifting a little. The centers, the dantian, the heart, and the third eye are trying to sort of push forwards. And then just pushing again. So now it's that energy is just subsiding and the points of pulling back towards the spine, towards your back. But there's also a real sense that you're a bit like a hedgehog. You know, the way when they get attacked, they roll into a ball. So imagine the sort of the tightening that would have to go on in their belly to actually roll into a ball. And as they do so, all their spines stand up and protrude into the world to protect themselves. But here, so we're drawing in the front of the centers, and then there's a real sense that there's an emanation from the back, not to protect ourselves, but just to sort of probe the world. Okay, now let's try basically the same thing, but without the stick. So it's what I call the negative touch and the positive touch, yeah? So just touching the fingers together lightly, yeah? And then as though you're pushing the stick together, you remember how it felt? So I'm just really just sort of relaxing into, so just a little bit of pressure. So this is the deflation phase. Yeah, so it's like almost like my fingers are just sort of growing into each other and just becoming one. So again, this sense that the back of my min meng, the back of my heart and the back of my head are spreading open. And then you just reverse it. So now it's as though the fingertips are glued together and you're trying to separate them. So you're sort of pulling the hands apart, but without breaking the connection. And just feel like that connection is a little bit elastic, so you can sort of stretch it. And you can just keep that going forever. Yeah, so it's nice to meditate like this. You can sort of just have this going for 10 minutes and then just reverse it. So just have like a timer on your phone and then go into the other pose, or just a minute. So now I'm pushing them together. And then I pull them apart. And if you get into it, then it sort of changes. It tells you when it needs to change. So there's a real sense that something in your body is actually breathing like this naturally. So we'd just like to become aware of that. And then it wants to breathe out. So this is like going into the cave. And then this is pulling, so coming out of the cave. Yeah, so it's like Plato's cave story, the man who no longer believes the shadows on the wall, turns round, freed from his shackles, and leaves the cave to see the world in all its glory. And then as you breathe out, there was another guy who looked back, saw all that light and thought, fuck that, and just went right into the back of the cave and no one saw him again. So this is real disappearance. You're disappearing in, but the bigger aspect of you is really coming out and just filling the room. And then one more pulling. Ooh, just feel like your fingers are like, ooh, they're really rubbery and they're just getting really long. Yeah, so you can practice this with other people, just with your hands on their body. Which part of their body will depend upon how intimate you are with them. And just letting your hand gently melt into them for the positive touch, and then just pulling the hand away and just feeling how the lighter the touch gets, the more energy there is. Okay. So you want that feeling that that area is sort of drawing in. It's like your own little black hole. It's just sucking everything into it and holding you together. And then you don't need the ego so much. Yeah, so it's what any sort of athlete, anyone that uses their body well and vigorously will have it. So we want to be able to just really just draw it in so that the lower back sort of rounds out, the min meng pushes back. And now let's just, so basically do the same exercise we were doing when we were sitting, but just now getting a roll. So I draw in the navel really, and then I roll it down the sacrum and underneath. Yeah, so I just want to feel the musculature that's involved now, not just in simply pulling my belly in, but in getting a circuit of energy going in the sacral area. So in the navel and then down. Ooh, what do I have to do to get it to roll down? And then the tail, it has to pull up and then back in. So just get it going in the lower abdomen first, and then we can just make it bigger and get it to go all the way down to the ground. So pulling in and just rolling it under. Pulling. Yeah, so there's a real sense of when you pull, you're sort of lifting, yeah? You're sort of lifting something up. So the top of your pubic bone is trying to lift upwards and come into this circuit, yeah? And then here you really just release that to get it to drop down, but then you have to pull again, otherwise the tail will stick back, yeah? So we have to make sure it's physical, not just a picture that we're seeing in our mind. So to start with, it's quite tight because it's just in the sacral region. And now let's just try just extending it. So pulling it up again. And now just let it drop all the way down the legs to the heels, then cups under. So now I'm pulling here and then back in, down. Ooh. Yeah, so to get it to go down, there has to be a lot of activity in your tail. So the tail and the sacrum are quite different. It's what you'd imagine, really. The sacrum is like a big bone. It's a big, heavy bone, so it's quite coarse. There's not a lot that it can do, really. Where the tail is small and delicate and just full of character. And there's a sense that it splits. It's sort of two tails, really, one that can go down either leg. Ooh, so here, ooh, I'm getting it down. And that's very much the tail. Yeah, so sometimes the tail is with the sacrum, just one curving bone like this. But sometimes the tail is really trying to wriggle free of the sacrum. So here it's trying to go back and down, and then it will cut under. Yeah, so yeah, so there's a real playful aspect. And it's something that you just can't control it with your mind. So your mind just has to just stop and just let it happen. Yeah. Okay. And now let's just do it just more methodically, really. So now just the figure of 8 in the hips or around the feet, but the back of the figure of 8 drooping. So I'm going down the back of my leg and then up. So just feel how the tail, to get all the way down there, with my body rather than just my mind. My tail, which is sort of raveled up like this, really has to sort of unravel, which means a sense of expanding backwards. Yeah. So this is why it's the thing of just having your bum in, it's never quite right, because I have to get down as well. And in order to get down, I have to extend the tail, which means letting it go back a little. And again, it's just that sort of Taoist structure, that sort of what they're calling the bilateral mind, what used to be called the bicameral mind. So it seems to be one thing, but then when you look at it, either in more detail or as part of a bigger picture, you realize it's something almost the opposite. And there's always a bigger picture. It doesn't matter how big your system is, it's always contained within another system. And there's always more detail. You can always get a more powerful microscope and see more detail. So you can go either direction. And we just want to just really appreciate that structure and just settle into it. Just feel how, if you want it to carry on, if you want it to last more than a moment, then one side has to be holding on whilst the other one lets go. Yeah, so here I want to let go here. So the other side needs to be sort of stable. So just like, having your weight on one foot to lift the other, you can only have one foot up in the air. Ooh. Yeah, so we're getting this action in the arms, but we'd like just to be able to just use the belly, just to use the alternating muscles in the belly. Ooh. The problem with the arms, we're so familiar with them. As soon as they start working, that tends to be where we put our attention. So when you see someone doing Tai Chi, ideally, what you see is their arms, but what they're with is their legs and their connection with the ground and just getting down and under. And the arms just sort of take care of themselves. No, it's just so riding horse is just a standing meditation posture that encourages your centers to recede. Yeah, so this is why our arms are in the front, just to give the body some balance, because the body is sort of falling back, or its points are sort of pulling into the spine and the back of the head here. Yeah, so they're talking now in terms of left brain and right brain, but for John, it was much more front brain and back brain. Yeah, so the front brain being the sort of the bit that's civilized, the bit that's developed relatively recently, and the back brain being the really primitive, that really reaches back through our evolution to, when we were the most primitive creatures around, protozoa. And just feel like just feel the guardian, this sense of a presence behind you that you can just almost fall back into. It's sort of supporting you. You can have a sense of falling backwards. And there's like an energy there that will just hold you. And then just feel the ground in the same way. So I'm just flowing down, and the ground is just like the cushion of air, that's sort of, you imagine like this air coming up that your hands settle on when we do the form. I'm sinking down, and the ground is like a cushion that's just sort of supporting me, not just supporting me, but just sending an energy up through me. Yes, a riding horse is the cave. You're producing the cave that you recede and settle back into. Like the monk's cowl, when he pulls his hood up, you can no longer see his face. It's just a black hole. Yeah, and we're always trying to come out of this, and that is expressed by a tightening in the lower back, which will tend to send the bum back and bring energy up into the upper chest and the head. And then the mind will start talking to itself. That's what we're just trying to get out of that. Yeah, so the mind talking to itself, they say that's the left brain talking to the right brain. And because it never stops, the right brain can't get a word in edgeways, But what they say now is the right brain has basically lost its language center anyway. So we fall into silence, We recede, we become dark. Okay, and now let's just turn it. So just feeling the two legs, both pressing 2 feet, both pressing the ground and causing this turn. So the 2 feet are sort of pushing against each other, which produces a turn. And then just allow yourself to relax back to the front, and then turning the other way. So what we want to feel is the turning, is how this foot doesn't just push this backwards, it pushes against this foot, and that produces a turn. So this foot is actually squeezing energy up into this hand across my back. And this foot is just sending energy up here. This is more like a straight line. This is the jab, the boxer's jab. Yeah. the straight left, generally, if they're right-handed. Yeah. And the front foot is providing energy for the hook. Yeah. Okay, so back to the front. So here my back foot is just extending into this straight arm. So it's pushing that way in order to get a force coming through here like that. And my front foot is pushing that way in order to get a force coming round like this. So this is the hook. It's very much part of a circle, whereas the other one is very much like a straight line. And I just want to feel this, feel the turn. And so then here's, wow. Yeah, so if someone is coming for you, then they are weakest perpendicular to that direction. So if you can strike them across that line, then you'll do maximum damage. It's even worse than coming straight onto a blow. And then back. And then, so you're turning, but you're also sinking. So there's a sense of widening, like flattening an orange. Yeah? The more pressure from above and below, the more it will squeeze out. So there's that sense you're being squashed here as you turn. So the more width you can get here, the tighter your circles will be. Ooh. And then back. And again here. Ooh. And it's just difficult because we want the two tails, which correspond to my two legs. So this sense that this side of my spine is reaching down the back of this leg and into this heel, and this part of my spine is reaching back into this heel. So it's like this side of my bum is sticking out, and this side of my bum is pulling under. And you can do it, because basically that's what happens when we walk, because walking is an alternate action. And so we're well used to it. So when we walk, there's a sense of this sort of a subtle rotation in the hips. And then, so when, so this is like, the principle of sort of splitting, like cell division. So when something is subjected to forces which makes it split into two, then there's just more energy. So the more detail, the more refinement, and the finer things are, the more energy, the more potential there is for them all to sort of just interact and squabble or cooperate. And then back. But it's always difficult because when the things do split, then you just need a mind that is that much more quiet to allow them to sort of resonate. So that quiet, this is why they say, stop activity, return to stillness, and that stillness will be even more active. So, you know, the quieter it becomes, the more pieces the structure can break into. And so the more resonance, the more energy, the more difficult it is to then handle and maintain. And then back. And then again here. Ooh. Yeah, so we reside in the connection. It's like the two hemispheres of the brain. You know, there's connection between them, but not a lot. You know, they can be severed in two and you'll still function. And so there's feeling that's in the body. So basically our centers are just places where the two sides connect. And we just want to just really relax and just let those centers lose their fear, really, because we're clutching, we're holding on for dear life all the time. And we don't need to. And then just back to the front, and then this side. Ooh. So this is what the therapists say. You know, most of the fear that we house and harbor, as though it's our very own being, stopped being useful a long time ago. You know, so it's habits that we took on when we were a kid, because we didn't understand and because life was difficult. And now that those fears, which served a purpose at one time, just now really hold us back. Yeah. So just letting go. Ooh. Yeah. And then just back to the front. Yeah, so we've got riding horse, which is this posture, which is wider in the feet than it is in the shoulders. So what it's encouraging, you know, if we get into the sinking, not only do we sink down, but we sort of separate, because I'm being encouraged by my posture to fall into this leg and fall into this leg, which means that there's like a gap that sort of opens up. So you're just being encouraged to just split into your two sides. So just feel it, like the 2 feet are planted, but they're two separate things. You've got a left side, you're two people, you're a left side, you're a right side. And they just hold on like Siamese twins, yeah? So they're connected, but not so much, yeah? And then there's this play between them. And this is what we want. And it's difficult because the more we sort of relax into this double aspect, the more the bum will tend to go back because it just tightens across here. You know, that's where we hold on. We hold on in the sacrum, really, the sacroiliacs and the hips, this whole area has to be constantly reviewed. And so when you get it right, there's a sense of just falling into the outside edges because you've just opened up here so much. Okay. And now let's just try a little bit of the stepping. You know, so how do we lift the foot up? Yeah. So I'm standing in the middle. So in order to lift this foot up, I have to put my weight in this foot, which means I have to move that way. Yeah. And what tends to happen is we don't move enough that way. Yeah? So I tend to just think in terms of just, okay, I'm just going to go down into my foot and lift this foot up. And then there's always a sense that I'm falling this way. So I just want to move this way as much as I can. Yeah. So that I'm really in that outside edge, and then the foot will come up. So this is often in the form, where we do this. And it's always the arm that's on the same side as the leg that's going to support you. So we want something here to encourage me to go right into the outside of this foot, yeah? So you can just sort of reach out with the hand, and then this foot will just come up without this sense of the weight of the leg pulling me in all the time. So I go out. Ooh. Now let's just alternate them. So now this side. Yeah, so you've just got to really feel the weight of this arm drawing me forever this direction. So it's an equilibrium again. It's not just a position that I freeze. There's a sense that this arm is trying to move, is going in that direction. And then a sense that this leg is always trying to fall and pull me back in that direction. So there's a balance, there's an equilibrium. And just feel it's the Dan Chen tightening here that draws me down. You just want to get away from just relaxing and letting it happen. Yeah. So I make it happen. I pull here, and that draws me down into this foot. And my arm going out just makes sure that I'm in the outside edge. Wow. Yeah. And then if the leg goes out, it's sort of balanced here. It's a bit like the stick that the tightrope walker carries, the big long stick. Yeah. So I've tightened here to draw myself down, and I've tightened the other side to lift this leg up. And then I can step. Ooh. So just feel this space here. It's like really rich. And this is just nothing. This is just shrunk into nothing, And then just place the foot. And then moving into it. So it's like I sort of cut around the back of the foot to get into the heel. So what I want to do is go into the heel and then around the outside edge, and then finally into the big toe. So the big toe pushes down to strengthen the arch of the foot. And just feel it. There's always this, it's always wanting to fall in because we're frightened. So if I fall in this direction, it's easy to catch myself. But if I fall in this direction, it's a different story. And so we tend to want to pull here. I just have to be brave, and just feel. It's like in the kicks, where we do this. Yeah. So this hand, John used to say, just imagine your hand is on a wall. Yeah. So it's actually on something that's supporting you. And then stepping here. And then again, heel, outside edge, through the toes, little toe first, big toe pressing down to maintain a strong arch in the foot, and then the leg will come up. And this feeling that there's something here that will support me. And then placing. Okay, so now we just want to look at just one more thing, which is something that John used to talk about, which was, placing the foot. Yeah, so what tends to happen when we place the foot is, we put the foot down, the heel down, and then I just get a bit sloppy. One tends to get sloppy. So you put the heel down and then the weight starts moving across and that puts the foot down and then you're in. Yeah. So what we want to feel is that what John used to say was you sink, yeah, in order to lift the leg. Then I place it and then I have to sink again to get the whole foot on the ground, but particularly the outside edge. So I need to sink here really just to separate my knees so that this foot is now on the ground and is potentially the equal to this foot in this sort. So now I can sort of play with the legs, yeah? And then I can bring the weight into it. Yeah, so I've sunk in order to lift the leg. This is now obviously supporting my weight, and now I step, and then I have to just sink a little bit more so I can get the whole foot on the ground. And then this leg can be quite strong. The two legs can sort of fight each other. Yeah. Because what I want is to make sure that my legs, that the leg is a potential source of energy rather than just a potential support. Yeah. So this is supporting me. This has the energy. This has the movement, the possibility. And then I put it down. And now I just really release here. And then this can go down. Now it's still energized because the weight is here. Yeah. And so I just want to be able to use that. Yeah. So I can kick the ground. I can kick into the ground and just get a pulse of energy coming up into this hand. Yeah. Or I can just feel it. And then it stops being energetic and just becomes a support. Now it's just supporting my weight. And then this can become energetic. Yeah. But it's that point of going down. I've got to sink to get the foot on the ground. And then it sort of tightens up. And then I'm in this almost like a locked position. So I then have to really mean it to get across of that. Really. So there's no sense of falling into the foot that's going onto the ground. It's the opposite. I put the foot down, I sink to get it completely on the ground. And then as it charges up with tension, it drives me even more into this foot. And then I really have to mean it to get across. So it's especially important in the form, because what tends to happen, we do a posture and we tend to just fall into this foot, yeah? So what we'd like is to be able to just place the foot, really round out. And then as I push forwards with this foot, this is already pushing me back. And then as I come into the front foot, there's much more of a sense of me turning into it than there is a sense of me just lunging into it. Because there's no energy. If you just lunge, it's just forceful, basically. It's just the weight of your body. So if I'm pushing here and pushing here, then I get this whipping, sort of like the slingshot. David and Goliath. Okay, let's just try a couple more. So one, sinking down. Just feel the two sides completely different. Step, and then round out here by sinking, and then coming into the foot. And again, just rounding out, and now just letting this just charge up. It's like it gets excited, and then it can do something. Because the energy is always like an interaction between the two sides. And then you can move into it. And then when you do move into it, it's real. Yeah. Or you could just use it to produce a turn. So here it's become strong. And now if I try and move into this foot is just saying no. my pace, and that will turn you. Yeah. Okay. So that's all through the form. You can just, and it's lovely because it just makes it it's more intelligent, really. Yeah. So for me, but it may just be me. Yeah, it's just so important that the form is a place where you're progressing. It's not just a thing that you do every morning. It's not a habit. It's a real investigation of the principles. Yeah. So it's like, to start with in Tai Chi, the teacher tells you to do something. The only thing you can possibly do is get it wrong, because you don't have the strength yet to get it right. So when the teacher tells you to do something that he's doing, he's had these years of sort of training. And so this is why, when in desperation, John asked Dr. Chi, how do I learn? And the only thing Dr. Chi could say was somehow, because, you can't get it right, but you have to get it right. Yeah. So that's basically spirit. Spirit manages the impossible. Spirit makes the impossible happen. So this is why, if you want to get strong, if you want to get better, if you want to progress, you have to get into spirit. Otherwise, it will just become, the work that you do will be simply maintaining a status quo. For me, the model is sort of like bodybuilding. It's a real physical work, bodybuilding or boxing or whatever. So you can use the weights either to maintain a level of fitness or to grow, physically grow. Yeah. So to maintain a level of fitness is all you have to do is go to the gym and just go through your routine every time. But to grow, you have to just lift more weight than you've ever lifted before to stimulate your body to get stronger. And that just requires a miracle. And spirit is the stuff of miracles. Yeah. Okay, let's just bring it up. And now here, feel this tightening as you straighten the legs. Because if you think about it, when we stood up straight as an animal, then it was, we did something quite outrageous. Basically, we moved these centers from facing the ground to suddenly facing forwards. So we just, when we were on all fours or when we were like an ape, moving like this, we had a much better connection with the ground. Yeah. And then we bring these up, and now they're connecting with the world. And as the world has become more and more man-made, we've got further and further from the natural. And so what we want to do is just make sure these aren't too vulnerable. Yeah, so the belly is obviously the most vulnerable one because there's no sort of bone here. So we have to create a bone. So we just, this sense of just drawing in all the time. Quite interesting with the sumo. There's a sumo tournament on at the moment. It's not very good because, there's no Yokozuna at the moment. He's injured. But it's like, when you see the Yokozuna sort of just standing there, and they go down, then they come up, and for a moment he sort of pulls his tummy in to get this down. and his fat just disappears. You know, I think, where's it gone? So you can see that this is just the fat that they carry just hides this real tautness in their belly, this real musculature. So Hakuho used to do that a lot, just pull it in, pull himself together. I love watching the the Japanese stuff, because it's really interesting, that thing of character and honor. Yeah, so there was an ozeki called Shodai who did really well to become ozeki. Ozeki's like the one below the yokozuna, below the top. And then if you're an ozeki, you're meant to set an example, in your behavior, but also your work rate. You strive to become the yokozuna. Yeah. And so he was doing like really well, and then suddenly he's just stopped doing it, and you could see that his heart just wasn't in it. You could just see it in his face when he lost. It was like, he was a bit of a moaner. But also it transpires he's recently become diabetic, so that probably had a lot to do with it. But yeah, the authorities, the judges, were so pissed off with him that one of the judges just got up on stage and started giving him a real telling off in front of the whole audience, which is unheard of, And you see him just standing there, and he's so grateful for this attention, because he knows what he needs is a damn good slap across the face, But you can't do it to yourself, And so he just took it in such good grace. Yeah, so we all need a regular slap. And that's spirit again, but it's not your own spirit. You need spirit from someone else or something else. You need a catastrophe. And then just one more thing, the difficult thing really is, for me, is it's just so sort of off the wall really. So something we never, ever have to do is just not just maintaining a little gripping tension here, but maintaining a gripping tension in the hamstrings. Yeah. So my hamstrings are always trying to pull me down to the ground, in the same way that my quads are always trying to push me away from the ground. So there has to be this, if it's only my quads working, then obviously I get to the limit where I can't move anymore, and then I just lock. So I want this feeling that, so what do I need to activate in my mind to just get these hamstrings to kick in? It's really difficult. Okay, so let's leave it.